I've got plenty of attending Petersford. Are you a school?
Hi, I'm Doug Melia. Welcome to the Same Kit Different Day podcast, and my guest today is the all famous Gary Ross. How are you doing, Gary?
Not too bad, surviving under the stresses and strains, mate, and there are plenty of them.
Excellent. So we know each other because we've met on courses before. What I wanted you to do for the listeners, is just tell us a bit about your experience and what your job is now, and sort of how you got there, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, so I am pleased to say that I am coming close to retirement. I am of that age, but my time spent, I left college and decided to join the British military. Ended up spending 12 years in the Corps Royal Military Police in various places throughout the late 70s, early 80s, and 90s. Left the military in early 90s. Ended up spending 20 years at Harrods, small retail establishment, some of you may have heard of, in the security directorate. The last 10 of those years, I set up from scratch, built and ran the security directorate training office there. Left 2009, partially at the behest of what is my current boss within the NHS, a colleague I'd worked with at Harrods who'd been trying to convince me to come across into the NHS. And the sentence he used, and it never ceases to amaze me because it's been right all the time, is security in the NHS is a challenge. There's not a day gone by without that has been proven to be correct.
No.
Initially worked at a large acute hospital up in central northwest London with its own peculiarities and issues. Moved over 7 years ago to the current acute trust I'm working at. Again, the guy that got me into it is the head of security there. We've known each other 30 years. An interesting establishment, as you know, for the occasion when you visited us.
Yeah.
But for those that don't know it, we have the reputation of probably being the most violent acute trust in the UK. We're not the most violent trust. I mean, Broadmoor, Rampton and the high security units are obviously way above us. But as far as acute settings are concerned, we are. And that's for a number of reasons. One is our locale. We're in a deprived area of South London. We are sat directly across the road from the largest mental health trust in England, which means we've got a constant stream of mental health related issues coming in. And I say this a lot, but I'll say it again. That's not to say that people with mental health problems are inherently more violent than any other sector of the community.
No.
They're not. The problem is the ability to read them.
Yeah.
The normal rules sometimes do not apply to somebody who's in mental health crisis when it comes to getting a handle on what the issues are. We have got a massive problem with gang violence. The drugs gangs in this area control the drugs trade all the way down to the South Coast, all the way down to Brighton, based on the information we've had from the police and the National Crime Agency, all the way through to Taunton, Somerset, and down that way, with the county lines set up. We have the added disadvantage, if you'd like to put it that way, of being one of London's 4 major trauma units. The end result is that we see a lot of gunshot wounds, knife wounds, gang-related violence, as well as the standard major trauma that you'd get from road traffic collisions and general accidents.
Yeah.
The nearest railway station to us is a nationwide recognised suicide hotspot.
Right.
You put that all together, and all of a sudden, it's a perfect storm in some respects. And as a result, we have to be very proactive and very professional at what we do. Now, we're fortunate in having an in-house security team.
Yeah.
Currently stands at 32 officers and a management team of 4, plus 1 or 2 admin personnel. 8 guys on shift per 12 hours. We have a heli deck, so we cover that. The guys are well trained. Part of the reason I was brought over from my previous trust was enhance the training regime that we had in place, professionalise them, and not that they weren't professional, but enhance their skills, knowledge, competencies, capabilities, to the extent that there's now questions when doctors, nurses, and other staff turn around and ask us for answers.
Yeah.
And this is just and for security officers, because they know the subject.
Yeah.
And they've certainly got a hell of a lot of experience of hands-on restraint. Now, it doesn't mean that that's our first port of call. It's not.
No.
We know better than anybody the risks involved the split second you go hands-on. We'd far rather get voluntary compliance every single time. Talking and walking without touching them, brilliant. But I live in the real world,
Yeah.
and we certainly operate in one. And unfortunately, there are many occasions, despite the best efforts and the best will of the people involved, it gets physical. And as a result, we ensure that the guys are not only very, very well trained. So we use the NFPS regime. With Mark known him quite a few years now, fortunate enough to know him, which we find works perfectly for us. But we also got a wide range of equipment. So we use mechanical restraints. I know that causes issues for certain people, both within and without the healthcare sector, who've got this image in their head of we trundle up to a situation, the first thing we're going to do is slap a set of handcuffs on a 6-year-old. It isn't the case. It's a question of what does the risk assessment tell us, dynamic or otherwise? What's staring the guys in the face? What can we do? And I work on the old principle that I was taught in the military. It's far, far better to train and equip for the worst and not have to use it than hope and pray that you haven't got the equipment and all of a sudden you find you need it, because then you've got a hell of an issue on your hands.
Well, we're seeing that right now, aren't we, with the PPE issues? And we've got a lot of people that are phoning us now to say we need some training, we need some restraint training. And in the current COVID-19 crisis we're in, well, it's a bit late. It's a bit late. We can support you as best as we can, but what kind of a contingency did you have in place that you've got no kit and you've got no training?
And that's always going to be the issue, isn't it? If you look through our history, and I said in different sectors, it seems always to mirror itself. Economic problems, all of a sudden, what's to go? Advertising and training.
Yep.
As if that's an easy option.
Yep.
There's no real issues. I've spent the last 10 years in the NHS, and one of the biggest problems I've faced is educating very senior management about the issues involved. And I understand they've got busy lives and they've got a lot going on. But part of my role, I believe, and certainly as an LSMS, and then when we had NHSP, I'm a qualified and accredited LSMS, was to inform senior management of the potential risks to them as managers and the implications of ignoring those risks. And I've seen wide-eyed stares on many occasions when I pointed out to them that, sorry, but you do realise that if you get this wrong, you're the person that could be going to jail. And this, but I've not done anything wrong. You think, yep. And it's a level of ignorance that I still see existing. Don't get me wrong, we've got better. The current regime we've got in place, we've got a head of risk management. She's been with us about 4 or 5 months now. We speak the same language. We come from a similar background. She knows the stuff inside out, and she's very pro what we're doing. But we still face opposition from individuals. And I'm not going to say any specific area, but there are some that causes a few headaches, who have ethical, moral objections to the concept of restraint in itself, let alone the use of any form of mechanical restraint. And I've sat down at many meetings and said to these people, I understand what you're saying, and you have a valid perspective. I'm not knocking that. But what are your legal objections? And it's very rare that any of them can come back with any form of legal objections. They'll quote NHS guidelines, they'll quote various guideline documents or internal policies or procedures, and I come back and says, yeah, that's fine, that's great, but a guideline is a guideline, and an internal policy can be followed and or ignored, providing you have the legal backing to do so, and the risk requires that form of reaction. And that's the thing they struggle with. And I'll say one final thing on this element of it, that, and I may get criticised for this, I really don't care. As I said, I'm coming close to retirement anyway. I found over the years that the minute you stick the appellation patient, the label patient on an individual, all of a sudden that person becomes non-dangerous. They're a fluffy, nice person. And I think, really? Now, don't get me wrong. If you've got an injury, you've got a condition, you've got an illness, the NHS responsibility is to provide you with whatever it can to deal with that, to cure you or make you better. But because you're a patient doesn't make you a nice person. And you see some of the people we get coming in through our doors, and they are distinctly not nice. In fact, they're particularly nasty members of the human species. And just because they're ill doesn't make them nice. You know, they were nasty before they came in, they're nasty now, and they're going to be nasty when they leave. You say that, and all of a sudden you're a horrible person. Like, I don't think that's the case. I think it's just facing reality. And unfortunately, there's too many people, in my belief, within the healthcare sector, don't want to face reality. And they're not the only people to blame. There's a culture from on high in the media, politics, all the way down. How many times do you hear, and we get it said to us all the time, patient comes first? To which my reaction is, that automatically means that everybody else comes second. And the very people that are trying to treat these patients, trying to make them better, if you make them feel second class, second rate, how the hell are they going to go out there and do their job with any degree of confidence and a lack of fear of issues that may arise, particularly when it comes to violence?
Yeah, patient-centered approach. You hear that, and you hear the patient-centered approach all the time. And then when they say person-centered approach, one of the questions I always ask is, have you considered who the person is? Because like a person-centered approach, really, you should be considering every person that's involved within that matrix. And if you look at human rights, it talks about the staff being suitable in their numbers and their competency. So, you know, let's get the numbers right, but we've got to weigh up what each member of the team's bringing and what they're bringing along, and if there's any weaknesses in there. And as you say, if it's a particularly nasty patient and the behaviour that they're exhibiting is challenging at that time, that's got to come into your risk assessment.
And again, as much as I despise management speak of any variety, you've got to take an holistic approach to this. You've got to look at all the factors involved, not just narrow focus on one element of it. I can give you a prime example without obviously mentioning details and names. We had a guy in last year, problematic. He got alcoholic a good part of his life, lived on the street, sometimes in home, sometimes out. Was brought in to treat for certain medical conditions, and perfectly fine. Well, that treatment was finished within a week.
Right.
It was done and dusted. Everybody was agreed that he's receiving no further treatment. But he stayed on the ward for 3 months. And during that 3 months, he made life absolute hell, not just for the staff that were there, but for the other patients and the patients' relatives and the patients' visitors. And a decision was made at one point where they were going to utilize security personnel to escort him off site to allow him to go for a cigarette on a smoke break. Now, like many hospitals, we have a no smoking policy. It's intriguing that unlike other areas of society, like football stadiums, transport, it's not a legal requirement. It's just a directive that came down from the NHS. And we got told about this via a phone call. And my colleague took the call and he said to me, do you want to go up to this meeting? So I went, yeah. Interesting to note that they'd already made the decision before we were told about it.
Yeah.
And I went to the meeting and I said, not being funny, but one, it would have been nice if you'd have invited us along at the very beginning, because we could have saved you a lot of time, effort, and energy, and said, we ain't doing it.
Yeah.
We do not escort people off site for cigarette breaks, particularly when they have a propensity to do a runner, which this guy did. And he heads straight down the local pub and he imbibes a load more alcohol, picks a fight with somebody, and the cycle starts all over again. And we went on and said, we're not doing it. And I was well aware that in the previous week, he'd assaulted multiple members of clinical staff in trying to abscond off the ward. Now, he was under a dole, so there was a legal power to detain. There wasn't an issue there. But it was a lack of understanding. And I tried to explain to somebody senior from both psych and the clinical side, but said, well, we've decided this. I said, well, congratulations, but you're going to have to change your approach because, one, we're not doing it. And secondly, does he or does he not have capacity, notwithstanding the doles? And the answer is, well, yeah. I said, well, in my case, then the next time he punches somebody, be it one of my guys or a member of staff, I said, I'll arrest him.
Yep.
I said, I'll nick him for breach. I'll walk him off site. I'll de-arrest him. And then he's on his way. And there was a look of shock and horror on people's faces. I said, can I get something crystal clear? I said, we're not treating him, are we? No. I said, so why is he still here after 3 months? Well, we've got a duty of care and responsibility to find him somewhere to live. I said, then have we found him anywhere to live? They went, no. I said, why? I said, because all the nursing homes he stayed in the past, they refused to take him because of his violent behaviour. Yep. And the question I've got, and this is just one of many of these situations I've seen, at what point did we stop being the National Health Service? And at what point did we become the National Hostel or the National Hotel Service?
That's a good one. Yeah.
Because we're there to treat people. Once they're treated, under most normal circumstances, they'll be discharged. But we're keeping some, not all by any means, but some patients for far, far longer. There was another similar occasion with a female. A family didn't want anything to do with her because of the violence and the language. We ended up forking out the money to decorate her flat before she could move into it.
Because it was cheap.
And
Was it cheaper than keeping her? Was that the argument?
well, we had her there for 4.5 months. And I'm going,
Wow.
I'm not being funny, but what the local authority doing in relation to this? Yep. And there's book being passed all the time. And what we're seeing is known as bed blocking. We're well aware of it. And it could be individuals just flatly refusing to leave because there's implications. We had to remove an individual not long ago who was wanted because he was illegal in this country. He got a leg injury, that had been treated, and he just said, I'm not going, and there's nothing you can do about it. He was a tad surprised when we did. Invoked trespass, gave him the option to remove himself, didn't. We had to go hands on to remove. Police were called anyway just to prevent a breach of the peace, and they said, crack on, guys. You know what you're doing. They know we know what we're doing. We got outside. He started getting leery outside. He got nicked for his troubles. The fact is, once he's discharged, he's no longer a patient.
Yep.
But there seems to be this approach that, but we've got a responsibility and a liability. To a certain extent, yeah. But what about the responsibility and the liability of the patient that's not getting the bed because they're blocking it, or because of their behaviour is scaring the bejesus out of 1, 2, 10 other patients there?
Yeah.
Again, my previous trust, just a very quick one. I got called up to say we've got a problem with the father of a young girl who was a cancer patient. He comes in during the day. His wife, who works, comes in at night. And the issue was that he's going around sexually assaulting female visitors and relatives as other patients. And I went, sorry, run that past me again. And when they told me, I said, okay, but they don't want to make complaints. So I sat everybody down, spoke to them, told them what we can do to mitigate the risk.
Yeah.
But enough security in there. Basically, we're going to follow him everywhere while he's there. And then we had a 20-person meeting to discuss the implications and what we're going to do going forward. And I'm sitting there thinking, it's dead simple. If he does it again, I'll nick him.
Yep.
And sure enough, 5 minutes into the meeting, call comes through. He's done it again. I warned off the old bill. I said, this time he's going. I walked back in the meeting. I said, feel free to have your conversation. Feel free to have your discussion and devise your strategy. I said, but I'm going over the road now to arrest him. And he went, you can't do that. I said, watch this space. And I went over and nicked him and turfed him off site. Now, we got a formal complaint from one of the individuals he'd done this to, and the police then got involved and he went down the road. And the person I felt sorry for is, one, the daughter.
Yep.
Not her fault. I spoke to his wife later on that day when she came in. Really nice woman. She's got another couple of kids, up to her eyeballs in it. I felt sorry for her. But I also felt sorry for the other 19 patients that are on that ward and all their relatives and all the staff that had to deal with this individual. And the question I asked is, at what point do his rights usurp the rights of everybody else that's in that environment?
Yeah.
And nobody, it appears to me, or very rarely, does anybody want to answer that question. They don't even want to ask the question a lot of the time, let alone answer it.
No, and somebody who's committing sexual assaults on people, there's an argument to say they're not very well. And if they're allowed to do it without getting treatment, you're not being fair to the patient either. So none of it makes sense. And when you said before about the patients not being dangerous and being fluffy and things like that, it's almost like the patients are unprosecutable as well. It's like, although they're not dangerous, you're not allowed to do this. You can't touch them, you can't restrain them, you can't get them nicked. Well, what can we do? So,
well, we've, in a similar vein, but slightly dissimilar, my previous trust, we went through a stage of about 18 months where we had a massive problem with alcohol theft. Now, and the big guys out there and individuals out there that'll know this well. And basically, the gel that was being used, that was put out for everybody to use prior to entering a ward or going on the ward to disinfect your hands, was about 97% proof.
Right.
I mean, it was evil stuff. I accidentally got some on my lips one time, and I just felt like it everywhere. Well, there was a crew of homeless individuals living close, or not living, but existing close to hospital, who would come in regularly and have it away. And the problem was that the actual value of the item was minuscule. So whenever the police got called in to deal with this, it was, street caution. Mm-hmm. Slap them on the wrist, don't do it again, don't be a big boy, and away you go. And I looked at this, well, hang on a minute, this is getting out of bloody hand. So I spoke to my boss and said, I want to do something a little more radical. He said, crack on. So the next time it happened, and I have to explain, on this occasion, this hospital I worked in was a PFI, a private financial districts hospital.
Right.
So the security team I didn't control. we managed their contract, but we had no direct control over them. I said, guys, next time somebody does it and you get them, call me. So it happened. I went down there and there's two blokes. They'd each stolen about 3 or 4 1-litre bags of this stuff. One of them was already consuming one of them. You know, they're out of the tree. And it's evil. It's not just taste horrible. It'll do really nasty things to your body. I said, right, call the police. A couple of coppers come down. I said, one of them nicked. And I went, yeah, but the value. I said, don't care. Now, in my role as an LSMS, I act in the capacity as official victim for the premises. Wonderful title.
Yeah.
Which means I can make complaints on behalf of the hospital, regardless of where the incident occurred.
Okay.
Property and assets. I said, nope. I said, formal complaint going in, one of them nicked. So they got lifted for it. And I think the total value of what they had on was something about 15 quid. And I went, sorry, they're going down the road. So they nicked him. I knocked out standard statement, exhibiting the gear that was recovered. And I also knocked out a victim impact statement. And I went OTT on it. And I then pitched up in court when this was heard. And it sold the premise that it's not just the intrinsic value of the gel, it's the knock-on effect. If we don't have it there, there's an increased risk of infections. Plus, when these people drink it, they inevitably end up in ED. They inevitably end up in critical care if they've had enough of it. We're looking at 10, 15, 20, 30, 40,000 pounds worth of treatment. So somebody's come in and nicked a £6 bag, 1-litre bag of alcohol gel.
Yeah.
Anyway, was up the magistrate's court, magistrate, and it was a district judge, listened to it, and he imposed 12-month bans on the individual. So they got a custodial sentence that was held over, but they had 12-month bans placed on them from every hospital in the UK. And my eyes lit up at the time. I thought, thank you, because I knew they'd be back.
Yes.
But the issue was, if they come back and did it again, we've then got them for burglary. And now they're looking at a 3, 4, 5 stretch rather than 2 months slap on the wrist. We did that for the next month. In the following year to 18 months, we had 1 attempted alcohol gel theft and no other recorded thefts of it. So as far as I'm concerned, simple solution, did the job. Did it move the problem somewhere else? I honestly don't know. If everybody had have adopted the same methodology, it would have put it to bed, or it would have dealt with them. Now, you are aware the incident recently, once the COVID started, that I arrested a thief that came in and stole some of our masks, so the PPE.
Yes.
I was somewhat amazed and gobsmacked at the reaction to that. For me, it was just another nick. The guys stopped him at the behest of staff. I went over. After a few questions, he gave up the goods, placed him under arrest, rung the old bill. And the value of the 4 masks he had away was less than £1.
Yeah.
Probably less than that. Coppers came, I said, it's not the issue. It was at the beginning of the pandemic. And I said, it's principle. And they took him down. Tuesday morning, he's in front of the magistrate. He's 3 months inside. Next thing you know, it's all over every newspaper, BBC, Sky News. It even made the New York Times.
Yeah, I saw it.
It was just a little nick. But boy, did it send a message out there. So whilst we're still seeing PPE thefts, and I'm getting reports in already from a few hospitals in London where it's occurred, there's not as much going on as I would have expected given the circumstances, because PPE suddenly becomes item attractive. It's better than your iPhone at the moment. They can make more money. So sometimes the simplest solutions work, but there's this innate fear of treating individuals who need medical assistance or care as criminals when they commit crimes.
Yeah.
And I'm going, sorry, unless there's a medical condition that prevents that, unless there is circumstances where and I've had it happen to me, I've been assaulted, I've been quite badly assaulted, bitten, stabbed, all sorts. But the individuals had no idea what they were doing. Now, I'm not going to take them through a court process. I know what the issues are. I've got no animosity towards them. But somebody that comes in drunk as a skunk, self-inflicted, some street drugs, self-inflicted, or has got an injury from a fight in a gang and then wants to have a pop at my guys or the nursing home. Sorry, I've got little or no empathy or sympathy for them. Treat them, yes, they're fully entitled to that and there's no issue. But they're not nice members of the human species. And if they commit a crime, as far as I'm concerned, they should be treated the same as everybody else. No more, no less.
No. And it'll be up to a court. A court can decide on their state, can't it? You know, who are we? Who are we to be judged during executioner?
I learned my lesson 6 weeks into being in the NHS over a decade ago now. My boss, in his infinite wisdom, and I'm still very good friends with him, I'd been there 6 weeks and he decided to bugger off to Australia for 4 weeks. I thought, thanks a lot. Talk about thrown in the deep end and get your feet under the table. And one Friday night, a report comes through from our health and safety advisor. Said, "Oh, you need to have a look at this, what we call a DATEX, an incident report." Said, "Have a look at this DATEX report." And basically, it was an attempted murder by a patient on a member of staff. And I've gone, "Oh, interesting." So I've rung the ward, got hold of them, and this particular hospital had a neurological hospital as part of it, so a multi-hospital site, and there was a full-blown hospital that dealt with neurology. And I spoke to this particular ward, which was akin to a medium to high secure unit in a mental health hospital. And I spoke to the nurse in charge and I said, "Oh, I'd like to talk to you about this incident involving the knife." And the basic gist of it was 2 male nurses went in to give this guy some medication in the early hours of the morning. He produces a knife from under his pillow, which it transpired had been brought in by his family to give him so he could peel his fruit because he hadn't asked permission, hadn't spoken to anybody. And to be honest, they really didn't understand the implications of his condition. Condition is, well, and again, most people never heard of it. It's called herpes encephalitis, and it basically means your brain just rots away. We all know what herpes is, but this bends in your brain. And there's no cure. There's just controlling behaviour. And the part of his brain responsible for inhibitions had just rotted away, it had gone. So he didn't know what the hell he was doing. But he pulls his knife and tries to gut a nurse as he was giving him this medication. Unfortunately, he didn't. And I said, "I'd like to have a discussion over it." And I said, "About the incident involving the knife." And the response I got was, "Which one?" And I went, "Sorry?" He said, "Which one?" I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Oh, he's been with us 24 days. And in those 24 days, we've had 28 incidents of violence. And it turns out 2 attempted murders, 3 sexual assaults, put 3 members of staff in ED, assaulted all members of his family, inflicted injuries up the yin yang." And I'm going, "Really?" I said, "So could you tell me who the police officer is that's dealing with this?" "Well, we haven't told the police." So what do you mean you haven't told the police? I said, "It's 2 attempted murders, 3 No, it's a clinical issue." I said, "It's a little bit more than that." Now, by the time I got to know about it, he'd already been sent away to a psych intensive care unit. And I said, "All right, I'll come and recover the knife that he used." "Oh, no, we sent that with him." And I'm just thinking, sorry, I didn't get it. You know, I'd come from a law enforcement background most of my life, either in the public or the private sector. And it was a shrug of the shoulders that, "Oh, yeah, but he's a patient." I said, "Who's tried to kill 2 of your nurses? One with a knife, one with a smash vase that he deliberately picked up, smashed and tried to slash the throat with." I said, "I'm not being funny. He may not have any inhibitions, but he knows what he's doing." And I spoke to a CPS lawyer about 3 months after it. I said, "What was the prospect of prosecution?" I said, "Send the family over to him." He said, "We're getting prosecuted." My concern was this: although he was being sent to an intensive care unit and would get all the treatment and aid he needed, this guy was never going to recover. And if he was ever allowed back out on the street, he was going to go out and kill somebody. Now, the question I know that would have been asked is, who knew what when, and what did you do about it? And I didn't want it to come back on us as, "Oh, we knew all of this, we just never bothered telling anybody. So it's not our fault." And you're going, "Yeah, we're culpable. Should have been people." But he's a patient. Now, treat the illness, treat the condition, all the rest of it. But sorry, if the crimes are such that there is not just a danger to them, but an ongoing danger, you've got to do something about it. And there is a severe reluctance, and this is purely my experience, a severe reluctance on the part of many people to do that.
I mean, let's forget the criminal side of things. What about Rideau? What about the fact that somebody nearly died? You know, somebody's not just fallen off a ladder. Somebody's been attempted to be killed. So surely that's noteworthy.
You know, it's one of those near misses that we've got. But another hospital where a friend of mine, we worked quite closely together at my current hospital, but he moved on, and he literally went from the frying pan into the fire. And he contacted me a while back and said, "Gary, can you do me a favour?" He wanted me to oversee some training that they were doing by another organisation. He said, "It makes no sense to me. Could you give me a peer review?" I went, "Yeah, not a problem." I said, "What sort of issues have you got there?" He said, "Well, let's put it this way. So we've had a recent incident that it's an old hospital, so the infrastructure is quite old in this place. And one of the results of that is they've got no piped oxygen going onto the ward, so they use O2 bottles instead. Now, there should be risk assessments carried out. There should be measures put in place to make sure that those things cannot be misused. They've not bothered. And the result of it, somebody coming out of detox picked one of these bottles up and caved a nurse's skull in, so much so that she had to take medical retirement. She'll never work again. And I said, yeah, all right. I said, it's horrible. What they're doing about prosecuting the individuals? Usual thing. Nah, because patient, yada, yada. I went, all right, fine. I said, what did the HSE say about it?
Yes.
And he started laughing. And I said, what's funny? He said, guess how long it took for him to submit a riddle. Now, you and I and anybody that's got any knowledge of the subject knows what the protocols are in place, the legal requirements, how soon afterwards you have to submit a riddle report. It took him 12 months.
Right.
12 months. And I said, is she suing the hospital? He said, they paid her off. I said, she'd have made a lot bloody more if you want to go by suing them. She could have taken them to the cleaners, and it could have been head of nursing, chief exec, board member that could have been facing potential investigation and or charges simply because they're aware of a risk. They can't be bothered to do anything about it. Somebody gets badly hurt.
Yes.
The same hospital only 3 months ago had a nurse stabbed 13 times. Fortunately, she survived, but stabbed 13 times. Again, because their protocols were garbage, in essence. And it's one of the reasons I'm not naming it. And anybody in London will know what I'm talking about, but I'm not prepared to name it. But no, she was shanked by an individual who wanted to get out of the hospital rather than get in and didn't know a way out. But everything that leads up to him saying, and a colleague of mine that I share an office with went down and did a peer review of it at their request, slated them for their protocols or lack thereof. There's been no changes.
No.
There's been no changes. And I'm not being funny. I've said for the last decade, until some senior management not only get charged, but get convicted and spend time, and then they broadcast that, then I'm sorry, you're not going to see a sea change. I'm not saying it's all wrong. It's not. There's a lot of good stuff. But there is still some old methodology that they've not got their heads around yet, and they don't want to look at it because either it's too difficult or it's too painful to do so, or, and this is my belief, if we ignore it, it'll just go away.
Yes.
And it'll never happen. And I'm afraid it will.
No, it's you deal with some very serious situations down there. So what I wanted to move on to talk about, Gary, was the kit. So we did some training with you. It's a few years back now, and I know it's taken a while to implement it, which is the standard. I tend to find that on a good day, from when I meet someone and talk about the kit, it's 2 years before it's implemented. That's the sort of the cogs get moving and people speak to people and we challenge it. But you've not only implemented it, you've actually got a bit of a success story to tell about it as well, haven't you?
Yeah, we did. So for your listeners, we met a couple of years ago on Mark's course. We'd spoken on the phone, and then pure chance we ended up sitting next to each other at one of Mark's sessions.
That's right.
And we had a natter about it, and I was very taken with the kit. So to give you an idea, when I joined the trust, the guys already had a basic form of mechanical restraints in that we use leg straps, CAS straps, call them whatever you will, similar to what the police use and carry. Primarily because, as we're all well aware, if you're going to get a really serious injury, it tends to be from kicks rather than punches on the whole, because larger muscle, etc., etc. So they were already in situ when I got there. What I did was introduce some more comprehensive training for the guys. And I also wrote a paper as part of an assessment of training needs. So I carried out training needs analysis for my boss and said, look, we need to go a little further than this because we've got other issues involved. The result of that was he signed off and approved an increase. So we had leg straps. We then started getting ERCs or emergency response cuffs, soft cuffs, call them whatever you will. Brought them in with the view that we're going to go the whole hog. So we're going to have a full range of equipment, including rigid handcuffs and your belt system. Now, we got the emergency cuffs in first. Again, got training for them, got them introduced. There was no great issues with that. There's one or two hiccups. One or two individuals didn't like the idea until they saw them in use and then could see the benefits of it. But we rewrote our policy, and part of the hold-up, which has taken so long, was a rewrite of the restraint policy. So again, when I arrived, there was already a restraint policy in place that allowed for the use of certain types of mechanical restraints. And then it came up for renewal about a year plus ago. And I was asked to overview it, have a good, I wasn't the original author, but have a look at it, see what you think, see what you can do. So I rewrote it. And I made it bang up to date as far as any legal implications were concerned, as well as with the range of equipment that was out there. And then we hit the usual political snag that certain areas or departments, again, ethical and moral objections, blah, blah, blah. And the policy is held up. My boss said, Nickers, we bring it in, which is sometimes is a pro. I mean, I wrote a 12-page briefing paper on the use of this for colleagues in other hospitals who were trying to introduce mechanical restraints. And it was basically a how-to guide pointing out some of the snags and issues you're going to face, the arguments you're going to face in opposition, and how you would not get around them, but drive through them by saying, here are the legal requirements, these are the issues, these implications, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, we looked at the belt. I purchased a set from yourself with a view to using it to train the guys to give them an idea of what would be coming down the pike. And then we were going to buy full sets in for operational use once the policy had been passed. Strange thing is, the policy still hasn't been passed, but Ian has gone ahead and said, no, we get them in anyway. And whilst we had the training set, we had an incident occur that I relayed to you. So we got a call one day from our cardiac department saying, we've got an issue. We've got a young man in here. He's been brought over from a mental health hospital with 2 RMNs in tow, and he needs urgent treatment. And the way it was explained to me, if he does not get this treatment today, he will not leave the hospital alive. It's that critical. Yeah, all right, what can we do? He said, he's refusing any and all assistance, refusing to have the procedure done. He is under section. He lacks capacity because of that, just a whole issue. It's a life-saving technique. We've got to do it or he's dead. Went, all right. So I went on. My team were already up there anyway. We're in out of public area, just off a corridor. Engaged with the guy, tried to persuade him. He was quite amenable. He wasn't violent in any way, shape or form, but he just wasn't having it. As far as he was concerned, there's nothing wrong with him. And I spoke to the cardiac surgeon and I said, just look, talk me through this. So he did. I said, so I'm not being funny. Why can't we do what we normally do? If necessary, we will, as gently as we can, restrain him and you can sedate him, knock him down. He said, if we give him any form of sedation, he'll flatline. The heart will just stop straight away. It's that critical. I went, hell. I said, well, I'm not being funny then. If we go to utilize the equipment we've got and he starts to put up a fight, surely it's going to have the same impact. He went, no, not in my professional opinion. I don't think that would be an issue.
Great.
All right. You know your stuff inside out. I'm not going to argue with a cardiologist and a cardiac surgeon. So we put the plan in place, took the gear up there, talked him through it, and we applied it. So we got him wrapped up at the knees, got him and used the safe handling belt and locked him off at the side. The advantage to that, and I saw it straight away, is if you've cuffed somebody up and you've got them on a trolley or on a bed and they need to do observations or put lines in, they can't because of the way the hands are positioned. Doesn't matter whether it's a single stack, double stack, whatever. With the belt and pinning to the side, there's no restriction on what they can do. Everything else is in play. We got the gear on, we got him on a trolley, we rushed him straight through into cardiac theatres, walked him in there. We had to restrain him a little because as soon as he saw the needle, because they needed to give him some sedation, because it's, they're going to crack his chest to fit pacemaker. As soon as he saw that, he got a bit leery anyway. He managed to calm him down. We had enough guys there to do it. But again, he couldn't move that much because of the restrictions, because of the belt. They put the line in, and sure enough, as advertised, as soon as it went in, bang, his heart stopped. And then they just rushed him straight into theatres with the gear still on. We got it back later and the rest of it. But the surgeon's case is quite simple. Without that, he wouldn't be alive now.
Wow.
So as far as I'm concerned, it's an extreme example.
Yes.
I understand that. But one simple use of that equipment has saved an individual's life because the result otherwise would have been catastrophic.
No. And it's tools in the toolbox. Like you say, you've got a specialist cardiac professional there who needs to do his job. He knows the risks of restraint as well as anyone else because he's seen them and he's probably seen deaths from following restraint perhaps. And he's got the opportunity of a device being there. But like you say, because of cognitive bias, sometimes hospitals just don't have the kit.
No. And we've gone around now, Steve, who's a colleague that who's the other trainer on the team now. We've been going around showing this gear to clinical and medical staff, particularly on neuro area and in the emergency department and others. And they take one look at it, you explain how it works, and they go, use it.
Yes.
Happy as teddy bears to see it being used. Even to the extent that we had our senior CAMS, Children and Young Persons Mental Health Specialist. We had, again, without going into critical details, we had a young lady in that was well known to us who spent 18 days in the hospital, 15 of which was confined to the emergency department. Now, this kid, massive issues, immune to sedation. She'd had that much over the years. It just never did
Quite
anything to
common.
her.
I keep getting told that. Quite common.
Yeah. And plus, you get the occasional case where it has the adverse reaction to what you expect.
Yes.
So the opposite occurs, and they get even more violent as a result. You just don't know.
No.
That's the thing that makes me smile about when people advocate the use of chemical restraint, and let's call it that, rather than rapid tranquilization. Nice euphemism, but let's call a spade a spade. It's it's chemical restraint, rather than using a chemical restraint. And it's all about the image.
Yeah.
In my view, I've had nurses saying long-term chemical restraint is equally as dangerous, if not more so.
Yeah.
With some individuals, it is initially dangerous straight on the off. So why use it? But they've got no other methodology for achieving the same end.
No.
So we wish we'd have had it with this girl. Severe self-harm, and this isn't a young lady that's playing at this, she means it. Yeah. And I knew her background very well, so I understood why. 20 hours a day, she'd be screaming at the top of her lungs. And I mean, at one point, they had 6 RMNs in there. My guy still had to go in and carry out some form of restraint on her. But 15 days in an ED cubicle, because I think it was 196 care facilities that they checked with that wanted, and not one of them would take her.
No.
So we're left dealing with her for 18 days in total. It's without the equipment to do it.
Yeah.
And utilising that belt would have minimised and mitigated some of the risks that we faced. And we'd have had the support of the senior CAMS lead there, but we didn't have it with us at the time, unfortunately. Going forward, we've now got that equipment. So we've got, as you know, a full set of belts in. We've got 4 of the emergency handling systems in, and we are deploying them. We will use them. The guys are well trained in it. They're looking forward to not looking forward in the sense, we want to slap this on somebody, but being able to use a piece of equipment that they know, because we've used it on all of them in training. They've all been exposed to it. They've all had the opportunity. They think it's brilliant, and they can see the benefits of it. It looks and feels far less invasive than something like a set of rigid cuffs. Now, don't get me wrong. Rigids have got their use.
There's place for them.
I know these people disagree vehemently with that, but I can show you instant after instant after incident. And I'm not saying tell you about it, I said show you. Body cam footage, real-time footage of incidents that have stopped incidents in their tracks when we've applied them, where before that, they're kicking off like hellfire. So it's a question, as you say, tools in the toolbox, having the most appropriate tool to deal with the situation, and being able to use it effectively with well-trained personnel. You've got that, it will minimise and mitigate most risks. There is no such thing as a risk-free environment.
No.
One of the most stupid questions I ever got in a meeting that was to do with patient violence and misbehaviour was, you need to tell us, or you need to train all of our staff in a safe method of restraint. And I just burst out laughing. And I said, they said, it's not funny. I said, well, it's not, but your question is, or your point is, let's get something crystal clear. There is no such animal as safe restraint.
No.
There is less dangerous ways of doing things, but there is an inherent risk every single time somebody goes hands-on. And that's what we drill into my team to make sure they understand that, to make sure that that is the last resort.
Yeah.
If we can do anything else, and I've got some brilliant blokes on there that have got an inherent ability to talk people down.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
Friends of them and become their friends and liaise with them, all the rest of it. Half the time, the biggest problem you face is family members, especially when it's juveniles, is family members and or their so-called friends, in inverted commas. Yeah. As I said, whenever we get a shooting or a stabbings coming in, we know full well what's coming down the pike. Yeah. I mean, just to give you one simple example, a couple of years back, 19 stabbing victims in 20 minutes from the same incident. Wow. From a club early hours of a Sunday morning, 19 come into ED, of which 6, because of the nature of their injuries, were still there on the Monday. And I was there and called into a meeting at 1:30 and said, and I'd known from 8 o'clock, I'm thinking, why didn't you deal with it then? What's going to happen at 2 when visiting hours start?
Yes.
Their mates and their family are going to pitch up. And these are from 3 rival gangs. It wasn't 2,
no. 3
rival gangs going hammer and tongs. And I lied through my back teeth by telling any visitors coming to that ward that we had a outbreak of coronavirus, outbreak of brain's gone blank.
It's tactical though. It's
Oh, it's the condition that makes you throw up and the other end without any control for 72 hours straight. And I just stood out there with a mask on, body armor, with about 6 of my guys inside. And these first 6 individuals turned up with McDonald's meals for their mates. I said, sorry, guys, you can't come on. Whoa, come on. I said, no, you can't. Why? Norovirus. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
I said, outbreak of norovirus. What's that? I said, it makes you puking out the other end. And I've never seen 6 gang members take off so fast in my life. They dumped the McDonald's and are off down the corridor at a rate of not. Now, it was a total lie. It was a tactic that worked.
Yeah, absolutely.
It mitigated any potential issues that we may have had until we could have got rid of those individuals. But it's knowing, one, it's knowing what you can do and can't do within the context of the law.
Yes.
That is paramount. If you don't understand the law, you're monumentally screwed.
Yeah.
And then adapting it for your circumstances and seeing how you can work around it in order to have the impact or the effect that you want to have. Safety is paramount. There's no argument with that in any way, shape, or form. And it often makes me laugh when people say, but we want to do this, as you said, because that's patient-centric. And you're going, yeah, but you've just increased the risk by X amount.
Yeah.
You understand that? Yeah. No. But the patient needs this. And I said, yeah, you put A, B, C, and D at risk because of that. And they don't understand.
No. On the safe restraint, that's something that tends to get me started sometimes. When people talk about safe restraint, they tend to mean the least restrictive. The least, wherever you're putting your hands on them has to be minimal, causing no pain, causing no injury. So I ask you about safe restraint, but what I'd like to talk to you about is the difference between the security qualifications, the mandatory qualifications for getting a badge, such as a door supervisor or a security officer, and operational efficiency and best practice, because that's my problem. I think people think that a badge means you're qualified.
Well, I'm a qualified SIA instructor, and my personal opinion is that course is designed to teach you how to pass the course, not how to do the job.
That's right, exactly.
Well, let's look at the very beginning. The current situation within the NHS, as far as security is concerned, is I was going to use a swear word then, but it's a monumental mess.
Okay.
It's as simple as that. Why? It is the same old British methodology, get by with the bare minimum. So 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago now, April, the government announced the demise of NHS Protect, which was the sole national organisation that had a responsibility for looking at violence and aggression in relation to staff within the healthcare sector. Now, they kept the counter-fraud element, but they got rid of the area that dealt with violence. Gives you an idea of where their priorities are, if I may say so. So we care about the money, we don't give a crap about the staff. Now, you can get politicians given as many sound bites as they want.
Yeah. They
can say whatever they want. But I work on the principle that my father taught me: a lot of cheap words, no action.
Mm-hmm.
Action proves whether you mean something or not.
Yeah.
And you have a situation, and again, I don't think most people get this. When people talk about the NHS, and we've seen it now with the pandemic, the government is at fault for failing to provide sufficient PPE. What most people don't realise is people responsible for providing PPE are the individual trusts. We have a franchised healthcare system in this country. I'm not getting political by saying this.
No, it's a fact that elements of it have been sold off.
It is you've got 220 trusts. A trust can be a single hospital, or it can be multiple hospitals. It can be an acute, it can be an ambulance, it can be mental health, it can cover any number of sectors. The fact is, we've got 220 boards with 220 procurement arms, all doing their own thing. And there is no standardisation throughout. There is no SIA badge for the healthcare sector. There is no standardised training programme, national programme, or curriculum for the healthcare sector, security wing. There's nothing.
No.
Every trust does its own thing.
Yeah.
They approach it in their own way. They utilise what they think they've got. So some trusts are still or reverting back to the old methodology, which was porters would double up as security personnel on an as and when required basis. To me, that is an anathema.
Yeah.
You're getting the worst of both worlds, not the best of them.
That's right.
A lot of the time, they're doing it with little or no training.
Yeah.
Which, again, is a legal issue, but most trusts don't understand the implications. You've got trusts that are wholly owned, and you've got foundation trusts. You've got in-house security teams. You've got security teams under contract. You've got security teams that are purely agency. You've got PFI hospitals that will have their own PFI teams, and I know from experience of which you've got little or no control over because they answer to a different hierarchy. But to the general public, all they see is a guy in a uniform that works at a hospital. As far as I'm concerned, they work for the NHS.
Yes. Yeah.
There is zero accredited training out there, other than conflict management training.
Yeah.
So I can only speak from what we do. As I said, we've got a team of 32 officers. When a guy joins us, he'll go on a 6-month probation. He'll be given a work plan, which will lay out what we expect of him within those 6 months, including the training. We do a mixture of training. So there's statutory and mandatory training that every NHS or every employee in the NHS has to do. The only area that really cuts into us is conflict resolution training is a mandatory requirement, as is manual handling. Now, we have got away from standard manual handling, and we have managed to convince both our training department and our manual handling team, as well as our legal team, and we're fortunate, we've got an in-house legal team, that the nature of the manual handling that we do is restraint related,
Yes.
and therefore it's embedded within the restraint training.
Exactly. There's no need to. Yeah.
Yeah. If our guys fulfill their annual training requirement and pass, there are tests in there, written and physical tests for them, and have passed that for their restraint training. They've also got their manual handling qualification as part of that because we drill it into them as part of the program. Anybody joining us has to do the man and staff training. So I said conflict res, fine. We then put them on a 3-month online e-learning course, and here's a throw one up for Jim, called Aegis, which we found best suits our needs.
Oh yeah, I know Jim.
Right, good course as far as we're concerned. Yeah. It gives them a basic fundamental understanding of the nature of the role. It doesn't matter whether you've worked in healthcare before or whether you've never worked in healthcare before. It's a good grounding with competitive exams at the end of it. So it's 9 exams over 7 modules, which are done under exam conditions. So it's not as if, oh, go away and just do that in your own. They're studying, they're doing their own time, but they have to do their exams with one of the management team sat in the room. Over and above that, they will do the restraint training. So we run it as a 3-day course.
Yep.
And then a 1-day mechanical restraint course covering cuffs, belts, the rest of it. My guys also get, because I'm a search instructor and a weapons awareness instructor, we do basic weapons awareness and recognition, showing them the nature of the various weapon systems they're likely to come across, with a big emphasis, obviously, on pointed or bladed, but also on concealed and disguised, given. Yeah. I mean, and I have got a cupboard full of that in my office that we've taken off patients, and that's just the ones the police are not interested in.
Yes.
Firearms a little bit, yeah, because we get a lot of gunshot victims, and we've had 2 shootings on our premises. I was there for both, and we've had a couple of occasions where individuals have come in carrying firearms in order to finish off people they hadn't got off the first time that were then in the hospital. So the guys need to, and it's basically leave it alone, stand there, don't let anybody near it, call the firearms team in. But they need to understand the recognition issues. Forget the explosive side, don't deal with that. We do searching, so we've got a search policy, and they're trained in how to search effectively and appropriately, including where consent is required on those occasions where no consent is required, as well as on-the-job training about their operation around the layout, the building, the rest of it. We've found that within that 6 months, that's enough for them.
Yeah.
That keep them full and active. Let's put it that way. Whilst going out and being with operational officers and learning. So we do classroom face-to-face, OTJ, e-learning. We use multiple methodologies to try and get the message over. Now, it would be nice to say, you know what, your first 3 months, you're in a classroom with me. Yeah. But it ain't feasible. We know it's not feasible. But we think that is still just the basics.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know. We're far in advance of most other places out there. No. And it really does concern me sometimes when I've seen operational officers at other hospitals, and I'm not knocking them as individuals, I blame the management, who they've simply not been equipped with the skills, the equipment, the organisational ability to be able to go out and do their job safely. And yet, senior management say, you go and deal with that. Yeah. And you're thinking, really? If you're that good at it, why don't you go and deal with it?
Yeah. There's no kudos in going to a job and not being given any training. You know, your hospital respects your guys because you can do the job. And when new people come on, there's people to emulate. If they've got an external provider in who's doing security, who's just maybe done his SIA, and that's all he's done. He's done his mandatory SIA training, and he's gonna feel out of his depth. He's gonna feel out of his depth because he needs that experience and he needs something else. And is he gonna feel valued? I don't know if he's gonna feel valued.
No, well, you know this as well as I do. You probably find it yourself. I've been a trainer on and off, well, since my army terms, but that was method of instruction. But as a trainer with qualifications, 20 plus, 25 years now, the worst audience you can ever get is another batch of trainers. Because you know that one smart aleck in that room is going to try and throw you a fastball, if not a couple of them.
Yeah.
And if you can't answer it, and answer it properly, and give a good answer, it undermines your credibility in the eyes of the people that you're dealing with. Now, we are fortunate at King's at the moment in that most of the training in relation to conflict res restraint has now come and fallen within the remit of the security team. So Steve's been taken on about 6 months ago. I've been primarily have lost most of my operational responsibilities now, and I'm just doing the training as well with Steve. And we're expanding the number of members of staff that we're taking this out to beyond the security team and a small cohort to a larger and wider audience. So we've jumped from 2,500 to 9,000 members of staff are getting conflict res training.
Right.
That's on a head count of 12,500. We've jumped from just the security team and a couple of what we call special HCAs, healthcare assistants, that got some low-level restraint training, and we're jumping to about 2,000 members of staff that we're eventually going to roll this out to.
Yeah.
The idea being that we in security would see if these guys were trained at the low end of the scale, breakaway disengagement, simple escorting techniques, we'll see less call on my guys to go up to war to have to deal with that because they're competent, capable of dealing with it themselves and giving them the confidence to deal with it. The funny thing is, you get questioned and queried, and I've had it said to me directly, yes, but we don't want to be restraint trained, and we shouldn't have to do that. And I'm saying, you see the datex that come through, the incident reports. I said, you'd be gobsmacked, you'd be amazed at the number of times that staff are restraining patients, just never received any training to do it.
Yeah.
And it's expected of them. And it doesn't mind whether it's pediatrics. Theatres recovery is a classic example.
Right.
The number of people coming out from under general anaesthetic that suddenly launch, ripping lines, central lines out, catheters out, staff go and restrain.
Yeah.
They've never received any form of training to do that.
No.
So there is a risk. The risk is well known.
Yeah.
But you're not doing anything to mitigate that risk.
No.
And that's where we're stepping into that and saying, no, we require, if only should, hopefully it never happens, but should something go catastrophically wrong, we can show that they had the requisite amount of training and they at least approached it in the correct way. And I'll illustrate this, if you don't mind, with one example. 2 years ago, when we started to run the first of the new restraint training courses for my guys, Sunday morning, third day, because we run on Friday, Saturday, Sunday because of facilities, logistics. Sunday morning, I get up, ping on my mobile phone, and I start reading through the datex from the night report because I get them sent through to me electronically. We had a death that occurred in the emergency department in Resus. And at the time, the team that were on were restraining the guy when he died. Right. And I've gone, oh, well, I won't use the language I used. It was basically, oh, bugger. Yeah. So I've got hold of my boss, let him know. I said, do you want me to scrub train? He went, no, let Steve run with it. You find out what's going on. So I've gone in there. And the guys had already gone by that stage because they were night crew, but I saw the day crew. First thing, download all the body cam footage. Yeah. Have a look at the footage there. The head of emergency medicine, a guy I know extremely well, who I've got massive amounts of respect and time for, he was coming to the end of a 72-hour shift, Malcolm. And I went up to Malcolm and said, Malcolm, he said, yeah, I know. He said, let me tell you now. He said, I was there. Your guys did nothing wrong. He said, I'll tell you that for nothing. Yeah. I went, fine. Police had just arrived. Told the police that we'd got footage. Yeah. We got body cam footage and we'd got fixed camera footage, should they need it for either our investigation or coroner's inquest or what have you. And then I sat down and had a look at the footage. And fortunately, the guys were doing very lightly. This individual had come in. He was a foreign national, come over on holiday with his girlfriend. He transpires he purchased massive amounts of ecstasy via eBay, picked it up in the country, and taken the lot in one fell swoop, right? And then got up. And obviously had a massive overdose and he was brought into us. And he was kicking and fighting. It wasn't a conscious behaviour. No. His body was just going in paroxysms. And the guys had to restrain him to allow the doctors to do what they needed to do to try and save his life.
Yes.
Unfortunately, he didn't survive. But the restraint was extremely light. You could see that. And this is, again, it's not just having the equipment. Body cams for me are a godsend. It's probably the finest bit of kit you could ever have in your life.
Yep.
Because this proves massive numbers of allegations. And it was there clear as day. And in fact, it was the guys, one of my team, that said, Doctor, he's just not moving. And then they went into crash mode and we bugged out. But I debriefed the whole team and they were pretty shook up by it.
Yeah, of course.
But it's, explaining to them, guys, you did nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing that you did contributed to this guy's demise. And the coroner's inquest found exactly the same. No blame in any way, shape or form. In fact, the guy was probably dead before he got to us because of the damage that these drugs had done.
Yeah.
They were fighting a losing battle. But it was important to get that over. And the body cams played a massive part in that, particularly within the healthcare sector, because there's large swathes of the hospital, because patients are being treated where we are by law not allowed to have cameras.
Yeah.
You can't have fixed cameras in those areas. Communal areas, but not in wards, i.e. in 1-bed bays or 4-bed bays. You cannot have cameras in there.
Right.
So the body cam is a super, and again, we faced opposition when I first brought them in for our previous trust, and again here, until people saw the benefits of them.
Yes. Yeah. So on cameras as well, do you you were telling me a story about where cameras are positioned can dictate where certain patients are dropped off.
Oh, yeah. Well, it came about because we would often get dump and runs. So somebody's been stabbed or somebody's been shot somewhere else within our patch, and all of a sudden you'll see a car come screeching into the ambulance bay, dump the body, and then leg it.
Yeah.
All right, and they just blitz off. And that happened quite frequently until the idiots found out that we had cameras all throughout there, and we were picking up registration plates, picking up the make and model of the car. Yeah, and we're giving it to the police. We're not keeping it. And then it was, early morning knock on the door at 4 a.m. They were getting nicked and the cars were getting dragged away. And they went, So now what we see is they'll drop them about 40, 50 metres up the road, set of lights opposite a park, kick them out, and the poor bugger's expected to hobble or limp if they can, or even on occasion crawling, while the car takes off. Well, what they don't realise, we've got cameras on the bloody roof.
Yes. Yeah.
So we will pick up the make and model of the car. They're right next to a set of traffic lights at a main junction near the railway station. Local authorities got cameras there.
Yeah.
The most intriguing one of a similar ilk is, whilst I've said we're not allowed to have cameras in treatment areas, there's always an exception to every rule. And in our resource department, we have 10 bays, and most of them are curtained off. So bays 1 to 9, partial wall, then curtains around them. Bay 10 is different. It's a fully enclosed room, 2 ways in, 2 ways out, massive amounts of equipment in there. But it's also cameraed up. Yeah. And the reason for that is we get that many serious injuries, be it knife, gunshot, or others, that we're entitled to have a camera in there because the footage ends up in trials, coroner's inquests, etc., etc. I get a call one day. I was working a Saturday to do some paperwork, and I got a call saying, there's a detective constable from a murder investigation team, one of the local MITs, would like to come in and have a look at some footage. I said, yes, rather than bother the guys in the ops room, I said, send them over to my office. Yeah. Gets her in, sits her down, says, what can I do for you? And they were looking for information on a drop-off of 2 guys, or a guy with a broken ankle. And what caused them confusion is he was seen to be brought in by a London Ambulance Service team. There was no record of LAS ever picking this guy up, right? And they couldn't figure out what was going on. I said, so could you explain the backstory to me? And there'd been a stabbing at a drug dealer's house. 2 blokes had broken in, tried to steal his stash and tried to murder him. He'd been stabbed multiple times, but survived and had been brought in to us for treatment. So he's been in theatres, he goes up on the ward. He'd fought back in such a way as one of the guys that had stabbed him had fallen down the stairs, got his foot trapped in the balustrade, and it snapped his ankle. And he was seen limping. Yeah, no. You can't make this stuff up, can you? And he was seen driving away in a vehicle with a rough description and a partial number plate. These 2 guys went on. Anyway, it gets even better because the guy the drugs dealer had been shanked and survived, wakes up, looks at one of the nurses, looks at the bed opposite him, calls the nurse over and said, you need to move me. said, why? He said, that guy over there that's asleep, he's the bloke that stabbed me.
What are the chances?
The guy was still under anaesthetic. The guy in the opposite bed was still under anaesthetic from theatres. He was still in recovery mode.
Yeah.
So they shifted him out of the way. So we knew where the alleged attempted murderer was because we'd got him in the hospital. We knew where the victim was because he's now in another ward. But we didn't know how the second guy got there.
No.
So I sat them down and said, right, give me time scale and I'll start looking at the scans. Long story short, we started scanning through all the cameras and we backtraced. So when we knew he was there from the medical notes, we knew he was in Resource 10, backtraced all the way around. And what we saw was his mate, who was the second suspect, bring him in a car into the ambulance bay and was struggling to get out of the car. There was an ambulance that was just about to leave. So the ambulance crew helped them, put them on a trolley and brought them in, which is why there's no LAS job number for it.
Yeah.
So they wheeled him in, put him in there, but it got even better. So he goes in there, doctors go in, do the sick, cut his clothes off, reset his ankle, plaster him up, great. And they all leave, and his mate's still in the room with him. Camera's still rolling. And you see the mate go over to him. Chummy goes up, rolls onto his side. His mate pulls out an 8-inch blade from the back of the injured guy's trousers.
Right.
Puts in his trousers, and then goes round and puts in his car. And I just remember looking over at the copper and the grin on her face when she saw it. And she said, and I know who he is. And he's just come out after a 6 stretch. And I know where that car is. And they found the knife still in the ruddy car.
And that's what CCTV's for, isn't it? That's what it's for.
It was a big thumbs up as far as we were concerned. It was just brilliant. And both of them were somewhat annoyed when it was played. And one of the defence counsels tried to bring in the fact that the camera shouldn't have been there in the first place and the footage shouldn't have been allowed to be exhibited as evidence, yada, yada. And the judge just went, yeah, out the door, bang to rights. Yeah. But just pure fluke.
Wow. Well, Gary, it has been. I could talk to you all day, mate. It's been fascinating hearing about your stories. What you got planned for the rest of the day?
Oh, day off today, matey. So mundane stuff. Believe it or not, I'm going to be doing some ironing afterwards. I've got a couple of books that have just arrived. I'm doing some studying, and there's a guy called Frank Furedi, if that's the right pronunciation. He's a sociologist at the University of Kent, and he wrote a book on fear and how we understand and how emotive fear is within societies. So I read it, it must be over a decade ago, couldn't find the old copy, ordered it again. I'm having a reread of that, just brushing up on some knowledge.
Excellent.
But back in tomorrow and then in over the weekend, and we'll see what joys and pleasures there are to bring.
Wonderful. Well, I'll be reading my Dimmons.
Ah, excellent. Good man.
Yeah, so if anyone's not ready, Dimmons Legal Aspects of Nursing is the Bible, I'm led to believe.
What's amazed me, Doug, is we've done some bite-sized training with various areas, including our ED paediatrics team the other week, as well as midwives. And we do sort of micro-teaching sessions for clinical and medical staff, normally on rights and responsibilities in conflict situations, as well as anything specific we want to do. Every time I've taken that in, because I take a copy of Moriarty's, well, I'm old enough to remember police law as Moriarty's police law, and then it became Butterworth and whatever it's called now. And I've still got sort of edition 28 on my desk. But I also take Dimmons in. I said, look, this is the Bible for every police officer.
Yep.
This should be yours. And none of them know it.
No.
And I can't understand that because a lot of the questions they're asking us said, read Dimmons. It'll answer it.
Yeah.
And it's done in a really good format as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that and the NEBOSH, the guide to the NEBOSH course I like because it takes people through the basic health and safety stuff. So with that, we'll get somewhere. Well, Gary, enjoy your day. It's been great having you on.
Thanks a lot, Doug. Speak to you later, matey.
All the best.